It's over 9,000!
Welcome, Super Elite Warriors, to Final Forum, a podcast for the discussion of all things Dragon Ball. I am your host, Jelli, an elite recruiting member of the Frieza Force, on a mission to find the best warriors from across the galaxy to join the greatest army of all time. And I am joined, as always, by my new recruit co-host.
This is the Bekinney. Say, are you finally ready to explain what you meant by "you'll see" at the end of our last episode?
Calm down, recruit, in a minute. Let me just explain to the listeners that we're
on a course to the nearest Frieza planet, yeah, and it's...
Edited by Lord Frieza for our listeners' safety.
Oh yeah, right. Damn it. We're not telling anyone where it is because our long-range scouter is still broken, and we're not sure if it's just broken or if we're being tracked and actively jammed.
Right. Also, since our
hyperdrive is out, we're taking it relatively slow, and it may be a while before we arrive. Yeah, okay, are you ready to explain now?
You know, I should just stall even longer because of your constant interruptions. But as we're on a bit of a tight schedule in order to bring this episode in on the lengths we usually like, I'll lay it out.
It's rather sad that I look forward to such menial surprises, but knowing that I'm unlikely to die today makes me look at things a little differently.
Right. Anyway, today we're going to be taking a look back, in a way, at the first arc of Dragon Ball. As in order to pass the many, many hours between here and Frieza Planet number...
Edited by Lord Frieza for our listeners' safety.
Oh, Mr. Perfect finally slips up.
I've slipped up at least once before. You can't even insult me correctly.
Oh, you dirty mother...
Edited by Lord Frieza for our listeners' safety.
That's quite a mouth you got there, Bekinney.
You're no better today.
Yeah. Anyways... Since we've got some time to kill, and our theater room was largely unscathed during our recent spat of technological troubles, today we're going to be watching the first Dragon Ball movie, Curse of the Blood Rubies, which, despite its name, basically plays like a compression of the Emperor Pilaf saga into movie form. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to do a commentary. What we'll do, we'll tell you where we're queued up in a second. We've got a bunch of notes. We're going to be talking about the movie. We'll go back and forth. We'll try to not interrupt each other. But if as we're kind of going through a note or something like that and something happens on the screen that we want to make specific mention of in the moment, like feel free to interrupt, and vice versa. We're going to try not to be super, super screen specific so that this can still play as something that you can listen to without having to queue up the movie. But, that's the idea, is that this is a commentary. Where I'm queued up, and where we are obviously queued up since we're in the same theater room right now.
On our spaceship that is totally in space. Yes.
is we're queued up at we have it at the 13-second mark. We're both watching the 2010 Funimation remaster of the movie. For those unaware, we'll get into this later. There's a version that predates the 2010 version. That's from, I believe, 1995. And then there's a 2010 remastered version, not revised. But that version is it's the uncut version of the movie. So if you've also got if you're one of those people who maybe had a while ago imported a Region 2 disc, and that's what you're working off of. Where we're queued up is right after the Toei logo fades to black. So if you're going to queue this up on the 1995 version of the movie, you will probably fall out of sync at some point because there were some significant edits and cuts made to that, which we'll talk about. But we are queued up at the 13-second mark, and I'll count us in 3, 2, 1, go, and then we'll press play. And you can feel free to press play also, and we'll just take it from there. So,
Roger.
Ready?
Ready.
In 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so the Toei logo has faded out, and we're getting swirling blue mist. So that's where we are. And this is Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies, a.k.a. Dragon Ball, a.k.a. Dragon Ball The Legend of Shenron. And we'll talk a little bit more about all those different subtitles and things as we get into it a little later. This movie was originally released in Japan on December 20th, 1986 at the Toei Manga Matsuri. It was shown as part of a triple feature along with, hang on a second here. It was shown with Gegege or Gigi, I'm not 100% sure. Gegege no Kitaro.
I think it's Gegege no Kitaro.
Yeah, Gegege no Kitaro. I'm going to butcher this. Gekotsu Ijigen Yokai no Dai Hanran. And Kinnikuman Seigi Choujin versus Senshi Choujin. The movie is directed by Daisuke Nishio, written by Yoshifumi Yuki with a screenplay by Toshiki Inoue, and music by Shinsuke Kikuchi. We'll talk a little bit more about each of them later. It earned about 2 billion yen between box office and rental distribution deals, or about $20 million. We'll talk a little bit more again later about the financial aspect, but making $20 million in something that cost about as much as a few episodes of the anime, it was pretty financially successful. Just to talk about the two movies that it debuted with real quick, Gegege no Kitaro is a franchise that in the US is also known as Hakaba Kitaro or Kitaro of the Graveyard. It's a manga series created in 1960 by Shigeru Mizuki, best known for its popularization of the folklore creatures known as yokai, which are spirit monsters, which all the main characters of Gegege no Kitaro belong to. There are 9 manga volumes across 10 years, over 500 anime across various adaptations, and there's several movies. Kinnikuman is a manga created by Yoshinori Nakai and Takashi Shimada, which follows Suguru Kinniku, a superhero who must win wrestling matches to remain Prince of Planet Kinniku. It begins as a parody of Ultraman before gaining more of a self-identity to itself across its 8 years of manga before it was retired, and then it was revived in 2011 and it remains actively printed today. So there's 76 total volumes of manga, and across various adaptations there's 300 episodes of anime, and I believe there's 7 movies. And right now in our movie we're just going through the opening, which is the exact same as the Dragon Ball anime.
Yeah. So, the Toei Manga Matsuri, or the Toei Cartoon Festival, was established in 1969 as a way to showcase popular anime series as theatrical films during breaks in the Japanese school year, in the spring, summer, and winter vacation. Kind of like how it is in a lot of places in space school, for instance. Toei would often splice together a story-driven 3 to 4 episode arc of a show that would run about 90 minutes. Or in the case of Dragon Ball, it would just create new content that would highlight what was happening in the show around the time. The festival has like a 2-week to a 1-month event. It kind of varies from year to year. That was happening. I lost my place here. Sorry. The festival is a 2-week to 1-month event where a double or triple bill would play, lasting around 3 hours. It was a way that to get kids into a given show that they might have missed up to that point for whatever reasons. They just weren't watching it on TV for whatever reason. Every Dragon Ball movie up till 2013 premiered at one of these festivals. Other companies hold or held these festivals as well, notably Toho with their Champion Matsuri, which ran from 1969 through 1978. The Matsuri were a way for these companies to get more eyes on their products, and to this day, Toei's festival, which is now only once a year as opposed to 3, in the spring usually, remains a major source of revenue for the company, bringing in close to 2 billion yen, or roughly $20 million each year. It's hard to find out much about the history of these festivals for someone who doesn't speak Japanese, kind of like me. But it's easy to look at the state of the film world and see how in the 60s and 70s they'd be a great way for people to see things they missed, as home video wasn't really a thing yet, and TV wasn't all about showing reruns. But then in the 80s and beyond, the strategy has to shift and bring in new and exclusive content, because why watch a movie you owned on VHS or a show you'd seen, a bunch of times on reruns? And it seems like very likely an inspiration behind the strategy of the Dragon Ball movies. The show was already popular, so you'd bring current fans in hungry for new content, but you could also attract non-fans who just wanted to see what the show was all about. In the 60s and 70s, with simply repackaging things, you could produce content for pennies on the dollar and reap major profits, which is still kind of the idea even into the 80s. But with the Dragon Ball films, the similar strategy was to take existing stories and arcs and sort of like mash them together into these movies, with character designs pulled from like rejected concept art done by Toriyama, and like extra characters that he developed but never actually put into the manga. Making these movies sort of a what if type of scenarios rather than anything that actually fits into the storyline of the manga or the ongoing anime.
Yeah, that's like what Toho would do with these is they would take their Godzilla movies, which were 90 minutes, and they would cut them down to 60. So you would have a lot of the, where the monster, where's the fighting, like basically they would just take all of that stuff and give you a 60-minute digest version of the movie. That, like we said, that's a 60s and 70s thing. That's let's cram this together, because hey, you can't go pull your VHS because it didn't exist, and even in the early 70s when it did exist, the VHS was like $50. So it wasn't like a thing
it was very cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing that most people have, but you could spend $10 to go see 3 movies in a theater when you were off of school. So that's kind of the origin behind these things. One thing to note, I don't know if you caught it, when the two henchmen here, Pasta and Bongo, when they hopped into a Jeep in their opening sequence, the driver had a little mask on his face, or was kind of drawn
like Kato
to look like that. And yes, he's drawn to look like Kato from the Green Hornet. That's yet another Bruce Lee reference in Dragon Ball. But this movie is Daisuke Nishio's directorial debut. Feature film directorial debut. He joined Toei as an animator in 1981, and he previously had worked as an animator and storyboard artist on Dr. Slump, during which time he was promoted to assistant director. He wound up working on Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z through 1993, at which point he'd branch out a little bit, and he worked on Gegege no Kitaro, the anime based on the manga Shoot, which is about soccer, Kindaichi Case Files, One Piece, and Pretty Cure. His last credit was in 2010 as director of the segment Odd One Out for the anime Halo anthology film Halo Legends. So if you've been keeping up with Star Wars Visions at all on Disney Plus, Halo Legends Halo Legends is kind of like the Halo version of that. It's just a bunch of one-off anime partnerships. I'm not sure if we'll have more to say about Nishio biographically, but we'll probably be discussing more of his work over the coming years, because, he worked on this Gegege no Kitaro and One Piece, and obviously he worked on a lot of Dragon Ball stuff. I mean, he's the director of a whole bunch of these Dragon Ball movies that we're going to be discussing over the next several years. So, we'll have more to say about him potentially in the future. The screenplay writer...
I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. I love learning about these people, right? And with Nishio still being around, if we could figure out someday to be able to interview him, that'd be pretty awesome.
That would be amazing.
So the screenplay writer, Toshiki Inoue, and briefly again here, the movie, when we talk about this being like a condensation of the Dragon Ball story, we're right at right at Goku and Bulma meet each other, and it's scarily like a not scarily, but it's very similar to the way it plays out in the manga and the anime, right? I mean, she hits him with her bike, he charges her, she shoots at him,
shoots him, yeah. I mean, and there's lots of little moments with this too, but there's also a lot of times there's like a small twist to it,
right? Yeah.
So like this one plays pretty much the same. Except now, instead of taking Bulma back for lunch, they're going to eventually realize that they're chasing. The bad guys are going to beat them to the Dragon Ball, and they're going to have to chase after them.
Right. It like cuts out a ton of middle steps, basically.
Yeah, essentially, it's and my assumption is probably just to like speed things up because they know they've only got about an hour to get as much story out of this as they can, and the pace throughout this movie is just blisteringly fast.
Right. And yeah, before I kind of talk about Inoue, which I've false started on several times, one of the big edits, I kind of was able to find out a little bit about some of the edits. One of the big edits was, when we just saw Bulma shooting Goku in the face, all of that was edited out. She never shoots him. And so some of the dialogue even around that is changed a little bit to just be like, oh, you're not dead from me hitting you with my car type of stuff. But so Inoue, the screenplay writer, he was born in 1959, and he's pretty well known in this industry for his work on anime and especially tokusatsu dramas and tokusatsu movies. He's the son of Masaru Igami, who was also a screenwriter for tokusatsu dramas. So he got into the family business a little bit. Inoue may merit his own episode someday, though, because this guy's career spans Dragon Ball, Dr. Slump, and a plethora of live-action movies and series, including Kamen Rider and Jetman. And he's even worked with Hideaki Anno, who people would know from Evangelion and Shin Godzilla and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we'll have to see what sort of biographical information we can dig up, because this guy's credits alone, his credits, span 79 different series and movies, and he has remained active through 2021, with episodes of Kamen Rider that he has written appearing on TV till to this day. Kamen Rider, just to sum it up very poorly, because I've seen 2 episodes ever, it's a tokusatsu show about a hero who undergoes a transformation to become a superhero, similar to Power Rangers, in order to battle the forces of evil. It's been running since 1971. With TV series, made-for-TV movies, DTV movies, web series, miniseries, theatrical films, all throughout the past 50 years. And that's where Inoue made his debut on Kamen Rider, actually, in 2001, with the series Kamen Rider Agito. This was like the second of the Heisei or revival Kamen Rider series. So I don't know a whole lot about Kamen Rider, but like I said, I've seen 2 episodes. It's pretty similar to like an Ultraman or a Super Sentai or a Power Rangers, where the series like runs for a year or 2, and then there's either a soft or hard reboot, and then the next series starts, and it's similar, but you have like different characters with mildly different powers. If you want to,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just say, if you want to find something really fun and easy to find with Kamen Rider, look up Starfish Hitler. Starfish Hitler is a Kamen Rider thing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Hitler gets brought back, and he's an evil starfish. What were you gonna say then?
I might be mixing up the two. Is it Ultraman or Kamen Rider are the ones that kind of inspired that whole genre?
Ultraman kind of came first, because
Okay.
it's from the 60s. And it was done by Eiji Tsuburaya, basically taking a whole bunch of things that he wanted to do that Toho was like, we're not going to really pay you to do this, and being like, fine, I'll start my own company and just write these off as business losses as long as you guys like bankroll some of my stuff. and we could kind of share the profits a little bit, and then also I'll use all this technology to bring over to you guys when we do Godzilla movies. And they were like, deal. So basically he like laid out a whole bunch of money to buy equipment and machines and things that Toho didn't want to pay for, but he was like, I'll just call it a business loss, and then I'll bring it over to Godzilla movies when we do those. And they were like, go ahead. And then you can also like, he used their suits and stuff when he was doing Ultraman. So
real quick, I also want to point out that there's like a slight, I don't even know if I'd really call it slight, but there's a character shift I think for Bulma here, where she's like way more hardcore than she is in the show.
Oh yeah, right. If this were in the show, the anime or the manga, she would be screaming
She'd be
and
crying
crying
right now and screaming. Yeah.
But instead she's
having a dogfight.
Yeah, and holding her own.
Also, this is explosion number 1 where nobody gets hurt. This happens multiple times in this movie, and it's a pet peeve of mine.
No one gets hurt even a little bit in this one, and this one's
not even a little bit.
This one's a pretty bad one because Bulma, like okay, Goku, yeah, obviously, like he gets shot in the face with a gun earlier and doesn't get hurt, so he's gonna be fine with his plane exploding. But Bulma's like sitting in the cockpit shooting, and yeah.
Also, that last shot of them falling was really awkward because the angle Goku throws the power staff at an upward angle, but from the angle you're looking down where they're falling, they're way higher than any of the mountains. So I'm not sure how that connected, but it did. Bulma's alive. Thank God.
Don't worry about it, okay?
I know.
We also listed Yoshifumi Yuki as the writer at the outset of the episode. I couldn't find a whole lot about this guy, but he has a PhD in philosophy. He's actually the head priest at a Buddhist temple, and he basically had the story ideas for a few of these movies. He'd write some of the dialogue and scripts, but not the screenplays. So he'd write the dialogue and some of the scripting, like some of the story, and then Inoue would come in and write the screenplay. So it seems like this Yuki is the idea man, right? Whereas Inoue is like, oh, I'll write the actual action of the screenplay.
I do also want to mention that despite the very fast pace of this movie, everything like logically makes sense, and there's a lot of little moments that lead to things later on in the movie that just show that there's actually like some decent writing behind this thing.
Yeah, it's okay, right? I mean, I think when the credits roll, we'll kind of give a little bit more maybe editorial thoughts. And we're almost a third of the way into this thing already.
Wow.
And
like I said, it's a fast pace.
Yeah. And we're already meeting Oolong, right? So yeah, it blisters along, but we could kind of editorialize a little as the credits roll on what they're doing and whether it all works.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but like the different, there's many different dubs and remasters of this particular movie. But the Japanese version, as well as all of the dubs, feature music composed by Shinsuke Kikuchi. And Kikuchi almost definitely warrants an episode of his own someday, as he was one of the most prolific and influential composers in Japan, having worked on many Toriyama adaptations, as well as the works that inspired Dragon Ball's creation, such as Doraemon, Gamera, Getter Robo, Jumborg Ace, Kamen Rider, Tiger Mask, and Sister Street Fighter, which is one I never heard of before. So that was a new one for me. Kikuchi sadly passed away in April 2021, but he had remained active as a composer until 2017. As far as the different dubs are concerned, the BLT English dub featured music composed by Peter Baring with a theme song by Peter Baring and Brian Griffith. Baring's a Canadian-born composer, and because his contributions are to the dub, he's not credited on IMDb for this movie. But he also provided the score for the ocean dub of the Pilaf arc of the anime. His works have been commissioned and performed by the Va-
Vancouver.
I don't know why I'm stumbling over this. Yes, Vancouver Cantata Singers, the National Youth Choir, and the Tudor Singers of Montreal. In addition, CBC commissioned his arrangement of Alleluia for the performance by the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. The last commissioned work he created, he's credited with, is in 1988, and there's no record of him being active since about 1990. Final note of trivia on Bering. I thought this was pretty cool. He's a direct descendant of Vitus Bering, the man for whom the Bering Sea and Strait are both named.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really unique. That was interesting, you know.
It's one of those things you wouldn't think Dragon Ball would touch on, but apparently it does.
Yeah.
So the movie was originally licensed and dubbed by Harmony Gold USA, who simply named the film Dragon Ball. They edited the film for content and renamed most of the characters. Just as some examples, Goku is called Zero, Bulma is called Lena, Oolong is called Mao Mao, kind of driving deeper that idea that fans have of Oolong being modeled after communists. It was aired weirdly only on TV in Philadelphia as a special. Harmony Gold more or less completely botched their release of Dragon Ball over the course of their years handling the franchise, and eventually Funimation picked up the rights and took over. Maddeningly enough, when Funimation dubbed this movie in an effort to use it as a promotional piece to sell the entire franchise, they kept some of the 1989 redubbed names like Penny for the character Pansy and Aldivia for the character Pasta until they redubbed the movie in 2010, which is the one that we're watching now. However, aside from character names, Funimation based their 1995 dub on the original 1989 dubbing script for the movie, which means there's some definite translation discrepancies. And they based their 2010 script on their 1995 script, which means that to this day, those discrepancies have survived. Just, I hope you guys are following me because it gets weirder. So on top of that, there exists a sort of holy grail dub of this movie, which was likely just a first pass-through attempt by Funimation, wherein they just straight word-for-word dubbed the 1989 script. Furthermore, just to be completely exhaustive, while the 1995 script and the 2010 script are pretty similar, aside from correcting the character names, the dubs have totally different feels as the voice cast from the 1995 Funimation dub was no longer being used, and instead Funimation used the cast of the characters that were being used for the Dragon Ball Z Kai dub that they were working on in 2010. So this means that Yamcha is not voiced by Ted Cole, as we've been hearing on the episodes in the anime up to this point, but rather by Chris Sabat, most famously known as the voice of Vegeta in Funimation's dub. The 2010 version is, however, largely uncut and does feature Shinsuke Kikuchi's music, which none of the others to that point had. So, good and bad with every version.
Yeah.
I guess.
I watched this...
Assuming you could follow along with that.
I watched this dubbed, right? And I thought, Chris Sabat does a pretty good Yamcha.
Yeah, actually. I almost didn't notice it at first.
Yeah. I think it's Colleen something. I'm sure I could look it up. I should have been a little more prepared for this. But the voice of Goku is very noticeably different.
Oh yeah, definitely.
From what we've been hearing in the anime up to this point. Oolong as well. Bulma's not too bad, but those are some of the. I think the Goku and Oolong are the two that you will notice the most.
They're the biggest difference, yeah. Honestly, I kind of like this Oolong a little bit better.
I am a little ambivalent, right? I definitely prefer. I wish I had looked this up, but I definitely prefer the Goku we are hearing in the anime at this point versus this Goku. I mean, it's Colleen something who is voicing Goku here. She's the voice of Gohan, like Kid Gohan, in the in Dragon Ball Z. So I keep hearing Gohan whenever Goku speaks.
Yeah.
So it's really really hard for me to
Wonky.
hear. It's Colleen Klinkenbeard.
You
And
couldn't remember that name?
I looked it up. And
You couldn't remember that? Come on now.
and Saffron Henderson was doing Goku before. Also, that whole thing with like changing the character names is insane. I mean, could you imagine a world where we were calling Goku Zero this whole time?
Yeah, that'd be weird. Also because like I like Mega Man, so there's some little crossover there with some characters, which would add to the confusion.
Yeah, and they're all like the names were all crazy different. Like, yeah, Goku Zero, Yamcha is something like for all these like they make the names a little more anglicized, I would say, in general, right?
Yeah.
They turn
I'll give you that.
Pansy to Penny and Pasta to Aldivia, which are like attempts to, not just use English names necessary or, English sounding words.
Yeah.
Yamcha is Zedaki.
Yeah, there's no real rhyme or reason for that one.
So in looking up some of the differences to the dub, it's hard to like. This is a movie that I'm not crazy familiar with, right? This is recording it right now. This is like the 4th time I've ever watched this movie. So
second one for me.
So I had seen this movie like once when I was pretty young, another time after that to be like, was it as bad as I remember? And again, I'll talk more about what my thoughts on whether it's bad or good. And then, yeah, I watched it once to prepare for this, and then we're watching it now. So I did watch it dubbed with subtitles this time, and they're definitely different. But the script changes are minor enough that they don't really change the plot details, just kind of the subtext of certain dialogue exchanges. So this can sometimes be done because of phrasing, or like most likely in the original version, the one that Harmony Gold dubbed, they're getting rid of any mild appearance of impropriety whatsoever. Remember, Dragon Ball had been gone after by the censors really hard since basically the moment it came to the US. So the original releases of this movie were edited for content. They removed all the crude humor and some of the violence. Anything about Bulma being naked, flashing Roshi, that whole sequence where he's got the bloody nose, and even the reason why he gives the Dragon Ball to Bulma and Goku. In the early dubs, he just says, I have no use of possessions, and just hands it over. And even then, the animation is altered to remove the tampons and tissues from his nose because he never gets a bloody nose because he never squeezes Bulma's boobs or looks at them,
right.
rather. I'm not super familiar with like the specific differences between the dub script and the subscript, even having watched them recently. And it's hard to find like a detailed breakdown of what the major contextual differences are. I mean, almost every line of dialogue is different, but it's hard to find anyone breaking down like, oh, this is a bad mistranslation. This is a, changes significantly the context of this moment. When the movie was released in 2010 and uncut, Funimation didn't ever. They retranslated the subtitles, but they didn't do that with the dub. The dub script just stayed the same, except for every moment around their cutting, whenever they would like added something back in, they did retranslate that for their script. So it's kind of like the minimal effort kind of dub. But going through and watching this dubbed versus subbed, I didn't see a ton of difference. I could see how, if you're super familiar with like cultures and customs of Japan and kind of the way things should play, it definitely offers a little bit of a different viewing experience, I think. And, because we have to not get through an episode without me mentioning Godzilla.
It's okay.
I can relate it specifically to Godzilla 2000, which is one of the least egregious Americanizations of a Godzilla movie when it comes to actually editing the movie versus like just providing a translation or a dub and releasing it. But still, yeah, it's an Americanized version. So the American version of Godzilla 2000, it removes very little, like just shots of plane flying overhead, shots of tanks rolling along the ground, but it alters the dialogue slightly, and it's nothing major. The plot of the movie is still basically exactly the same, but there's a lot of subtle or not so subtle Y2K references in the Japanese version, and in the American version, they just change it to like, instead of being like, oh, computer networks will be the outdoing of humanity, the plot's just more streamlined, and they just make these little tweaks that are like, oh, this alien's trying to destroy us, instead of it's trying to destroy us using our own computer networks against us. Like it lessens the Y2K part of it. It streamlines the plot a little bit, changes some sound effects, alters some sound editing, changes bits of score, and you wind up with two versions of the movie that only run a couple of minutes different in running length, but they have very different feels when you watch them. One feels like a fun, kind of campy alien invasion movie, and the other one feels like it's trying to be like a serious science fiction movie. Take whatever from this that you will. Toho actually held limited screenings of the Americanized version of Godzilla 2000 in theaters in Japan. The only other Americanization of Godzilla they've done that for was the original movie, the 1954 movie, which was done in 56 as King of the Monsters. And the director of Godzilla 2000 actually says his preferred version is the American version.
Really?
That's what he says. So
interesting.
I could see how, if you're very familiar with this movie, because this is an older movie, right? This is from the 80s. And if you grew up watching this and you liked it and all that kind of stuff, watching it dubbed versus subbed could wind up having a big difference. And especially, I could imagine if you were familiar with like that 95 Funimation version, a different translation with different music being a huge, huge difference. Right? I mean, music is at least a third of what makes a movie, I think. Maybe more. And
you might be able to argue the percentage a little bit, but yeah, I in general agree with that.
And so I could see how just changing the score, changing a few translation words here and there, you know, it changes the feel for sure.
Speaking of changing the feel, this movie is even dirtier than the original show.
I think it seems like subtitled should be the way to go, probably. The Frankenstein of a translation that exists in the 2010 dub probably leads to some weird-ish flow by comparison. So I would advocate for the subtitles, I think.
I'm going to have to say the same, and that's usually my recommendation for really any anime, because it's the closest you get to the original vision for it, I guess you'd say.
I usually watch stuff dubbed, though, I'll be honest.
Well, I mean, if you got it on in the background, it kind of makes sense, because you don't want to have to try and read everything that's going on.
Yeah.
We were talking about name changes a little bit ago. So as with most things Dragon Ball, we get some punny names in this movie. So obviously the villain is Garumas, which is adapted from the word gourmet.
In the Japanese, or like the original translations, he's actually Gourmeth.
Oh, okay. So that's even closer. Yeah.
Which I don't. Yeah.
I don't know why you would change that. That's perfect. So at this time in Japan, there was kind of like a gourmet food craze. So the word was adapted into Dragon Ball property to reflect those trends. Apparently, this King Garumas can only eat fancy food.
Yeah, it's like that is the eponymous curse of the Blood Rubies. Ever since he started mining them, he only can get any satisfaction and reprieve from his hunger by eating more and more expensive foods.
That's an interesting curse. Next up, we got vongo, named after vongole sauce, which is a topping for pasta, typically linguine, made with clams and clam sauce. It's most often white, but it can also be red.
Yeah, he's the
pasta,
big dude.
I mean, that one's obvious. Yes, the big dude. Pasta is the female soldier.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious. She's called Pasta. Pansy, or I think, do they call her Pansy in this version, or was it Penny? I think it was Penny, right?
Yeah, I think it's Penny.
Most likely derived from flowers, especially given the sort of environmental conservation overtone of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So for years, the movie's only ever official title was Dragon Ball. It wasn't until the mid-90s, sort of like around 95, I think, that the subtitle The Legend of Shenlong was added. And that's since been the official Japanese language title. Curse of the Blood Rubies was a Funimation thing that was added for their dub. Anyone's guess as to why? I guess it makes sense because they're referenced multiple times in the movie, but
yeah, why not just go with the Legend of
like,
Shenron or something? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's not like they're a major plot point. It's really just kind of something that serves to kick off the movie.
It is. I mean, yeah, it's definitely not like a major plot point, but it does. Just to talk about it, right? It definitely changes, like the Blood Rubies thing changes the motivations of this movie's antagonist, right?
True.
I mean, we see that all throughout. You know, at the very beginning, when they're in that dogfight that we talked about, which it feels like we talked about 5 minutes ago, and we're almost done with the movie. When they're in that dogfight, the two kind of henchmen characters, the Pasta and Vongol, they mention like, we paid you, you know, and it is like when Bulma goes,
and of course Goku, being his dumb hick self, doesn't even know what money is, and he's trying to return the coin to him, thinking they'd left it on accident.
But yeah, they leave a gold coin behind in exchange for the Dragon Ball, you know.
Yeah. Honestly, decent trade.
They're not trying to like. It's one of those. This is one of those, like, the main antagonist, King Gurumis or Gormeth. He's got kind of one of those mildly noble, or at least very, very understandable goals,
right?
While being a little more willing to.
They
go
try
to any
make
extent
him a little
to
sympathetic.
But he also, like, he hires. It's kind of one of those. He hires these two thugs, is what it seems like, without realizing the extent that they are really willing to go to in order to get him what he wants. You know,
right?
Because he definitely.
So it's I got you.
When everyone's talking about this guy, like when Penny's talking about him, like, she mentions that he used to be good, and until he found the Blood Rubies, and he even is like, I can't be free from this hunger until I get, you know, the Dragon Balls or more Blood Rubies. Like, he really seems like to pull a bit of a Lord of the Rings reference, like a Theoden, right? Like, he was a good,
okay.
He was a good and honorable person, and then he got kind of infected with something bad, and it made him worse. And that is definitely way different from Emperor Pilaf.
It also sets up for my favorite part of this movie, which is the denouement after this climax. But I'll talk about that when we actually get to it. It's just really funny to me.
But, you know, I mean, other than the big change being, like, the villain is very different in his motivations than Pilaf, right?
Yeah.
One of the other big differences, we're seeing it kind of right here, is we have this big kind of action dogfight in the air, and Goku flying around on flying Nimbus.
I think technically Goku versus Vangel here is I think that's technically the first aerial fighting in this show.
It might be. But yeah, you're talking about at a point. One of the things, like, normally when we do commentaries in the future, we'll kind of do them as we come across them in the timeline of the show as we're reviewing it. But I wanted to get one of these so that our listeners could have a feel for us doing a commentary, just to show you guys, hey, we're going to do reviews and interviews and commentaries and, like, have different flavors as much as we can. But this show, when this movie was made in late 86, the show was, like, already popular. And the manga was already popular. But what were they popular with? Not the Emperor Pilaf stuff. They were popular with the tournament stuff and the fighting. And so that's where you've got this kind of one of the big differences here between this arc and the Pilaf, or this story and the Pilaf arc, is this has a much more punched up action-y climax, right? Goku's got this big aerial battle. He's trading blows with Vangel. There's Yamcha is having a whatever this aerial jet ski thing is. Battle in the air.
He's getting his moment, and he's appreciating it because this is the only time this will ever happen for him. They did my boy dirty.
But yeah, that's the this movie was made when the show had kind of already achieved some popularity, and the manga was getting more and more popular, and they realized that, like, the action was selling more than the gags, so we punch up the action here.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, I think it's just kind of them understanding their audience, understanding what works for them, and then taking you're put in this situation where they're like, hey, we need to make a film for this film festival, and they go, okay, well, we have all this existing stuff. Maybe we just tweak it a little bit and punch up the action. It'll be a success. And I mean, I think their strategy worked pretty well. I mean, we were talking about, like, the box office returns for it for what's essentially like 2 episodes of an anime. That's pretty decent.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, here we get some more of the uncomfortable gropiness. Although this one's played for a gag,
a little
for
bit.
Sure. This one is one of those ones that when we did our episodes on that I would say, like, this hits in the more funny realm. Like,
Well, because it's playing up Yamcha's weakness.
Yeah. But yeah, this movie, we're running around like this aerial castle, and we're having dogfights in the sky and all this stuff. The movie itself has a lot of similarities to a Studio Ghibli movie called Castle in the Sky. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
Actually, I'm not.
It could be just a coincidence, but I think there might be some intent behind it. First of all, while Castle in the Sky is a Ghibli movie, it was still distributed by Toei. So Toei had to have been pretty aware of the forthcoming Miyazaki movie that they could have capitalized on. Castle in the Sky is Ghibli's first movie, and they were a brand new studio, but Miyazaki was an established director. He had done, I think, a Lupin the Third movie and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is an awesome movie if you've never seen.
Agreed.
So he was already, like, an established name that people knew, and he was ready to break into being a huge name. So it's not unreasonable to think that Toei would be like, oh, let's maybe try and ride those coattails a little bit with some design work and some thematic elements. And I feel like if you look and pay attention to some of the backgrounds and establishing shots in this movie, there's stuff like this, like where we got these columns and this ancient castle and all this kind of stuff. There's some similarity, at least a little bit. On top of that,
I could see that.
On top of that, both movies employed the company Shindo Production to do keyframe animation. So right off the bat, you've got the same studio doing, key animation. There's some similarity in style and design and creative teams. So, yeah, I think there's some intent to it. I won't say, like, it's very clearly not.
You make a good argument for it, at least.
It's very clearly
I
not
would say.
just like a Castle in the Sky ripoff by any means.
Right.
But yeah, there's enough kind of similarities that you could see, you know, especially
No sells the Kamehameha wave.
Especially on top of that, the other piece of it being they're trying to make this movie as cheaply as possible.
Also true. Hey, we got some you know, pieces of animation and stuff that are kind of close. Maybe we could just sort of trace over them or repaint them.
Right. So
I think Disney did that a lot for like, I know Jungle Book's one. I think Robin Hood was one that was made almost entirely of like reused animation.
Yeah,
I'm
you
pretty sure.
can like you can
like
look
a
up,
lot of the animation for Baloo. You can see Little John.
Yes.
On Little John in that movie.
Yes. There's like really good side by side comparisons and things of that'll break those down for you. That yes.
Well, you know, when you've got to pay a person to sit there and draw everything frame by frame, you got to try and save money somehow, I guess.
Yeah. And that is one thing, you know, my biggest positive with this movie, with watching it, is this animation is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And a lot of the backgrounds, it's very picturesque, almost kind of like a storybook in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which I think is really reminiscent, especially of those really early episodes in the anime. Especially like that first episode, those opening shots. It's a lot of that same aesthetic where it's almost like you're opening a storybook.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because one of the things I was reading about Gegege no Kitaro as I was doing some research is that franchise kind of has its roots in, and I can't remember the name of the type of storytelling it is, but it's like very popular, or kind of more was popular back in the day, Japanese storytelling, where they would have these picture scrolls, and like a person would roll to the next picture and then like tell a story, and like they would scroll to the next picture and like tell a story with these pictures. It was like picture-based storytelling. So you've got some kind of unique cohesion there.
Sure.
But yeah, there, Shenron, you know, the wish in this is not a gag.
Thank God.
It's not panties. The little girl does not wish for panties. Although, boy, what a wish. Oh, is this your favorite part here?
So this is my favorite part here. So he's like, "Hey, I'm still hungry," and then the girl gives him an apple.
And he doesn't know what it is?
Yeah, like, how you've lived here, you rule this place. How do you know how do you not know what that is? And then they shame him for being a horrible industrialist and destroying the kingdom. Okay, I get that. But then, like, all he has to say about everything that he's done is, "I'm so ashamed." That's it.
And then the trees come back.
Problem solved.
Well, and even the wish itself, right? Like, that is a big difference, I think, between this wish and a lot of the wishes in the show. A lot of the wishes in the show still leave major problems hanging around. You know, like,
Right.
Like, yes, Oolong wishes for panties, and that stops Pilaf, but they still have to then deal with Pilaf.
Yeah.
Other wishes too, you know, like at one point they wish for everyone killed by someone to come back to life, but then they are still like on a planet or whatever, right? So there's whatever. The wish in this is very like, I wish for everything to be fine again.
Which is perfect for a movie that's not canon. So
Right. It's just funny. The other big difference between this and the manga and anime is no Uzaru.
Which is honestly something I thought was going to happen given how big the king was when he's first introduced. I figured, oh, of course, it's something Toriyama would totally love, a kaiju battle at the end.
Nah.
But it didn't happen. I
And
mean,
it's-
to me, it's like, it's right there. It's so obvious. How would you not do this?
and it's an interesting choice too, because, you know, like we mentioned, and sort of the scale I'll come to when we talk about now, because the movie's over, so we'll talk about grading this on a, you know, a 1 to 5 kind of scale. Is this was meant to be like a commercial for the show, basically, right? It's that whole idea of like, we got to produce some content that'll put some people in the theaters, but B, not turn off people who are not familiar with the show, but C, get people who are familiar with the show into the theater. Because why would you go to watch 2 or 3 episodes of the anime when you could just stay home and watch the anime?
True.
So you got to produce
you don't want to alienate the fan base that got you to where you are.
Right. So you got to produce original content, and it's got to have some exclusivity to it, but you're using it as a, hey, this is everything. Like, and if you go and watch these movies as they go along, every movie is like, it's basically just a showcase of whatever characters and powers are popular at the time that that movie is kind of being shown.
Yep.
And so it's interesting that there's no Uzaru, because
True.
that's a piece of this that was popular at the time that this was made. But on a scale from 1 to 5, I almost feel like I have like 3 different ways I could rate this. You know, you could rate it as like a movie unto itself. You could rate it as a movie as far as me being a fan of Dragon Ball and having, you know, read the manga and watched the anime. And then you could also rate it as a commercial. And, you know, like it's one of those things
is that
where
what our world has become? We're rating advertisements now. Jeez.
it's one of those things where as a fan who has watched the anime and read the manga and like this is kind of useless to me. I'll be honest, right? I mean, there's some good animation, a couple cool fights and stuff, but like, this doesn't do a whole lot for me. As
yeah, I mean,
as that
the
quick
art's pretty good.
as that quick showcase, it's actually pretty good. Like, if you're gonna say, hey, watch Dragon Ball, and someone was like, man, I don't want to watch 500 episodes of something, you could kind of be like, hey, watch this. It's 50 minutes. It'll give you an idea of what like the first 20 episodes are like.
I could see that.
But even like unto itself as a movie in a vacuum, it's just very okay. So
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty middle of the road as far as like just being a movie unto itself. Kind of leaning more towards below average for me.
yeah. So we have the obvious rating system ahead of us. How many Dragon Balls out of not 7? We can't do 7.
No, come on, you can't break the meta like that.
We can't do 7. How do you rate things out of 7?
Listen. If you're gonna call it Dragon Balls, we have to do it out of 7.
We can. I could figure. I'll give this a 3 out of 7.
It's exactly where I was gonna put it.
Because I would give it a 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. It's a 3. There's some good art. There's some. It's got a decent soundtrack, but I mean, it's super rushed. I mean, we understand why, but it's still really fast. There's some changes in characterization, which in some spots kind of make for a better movie. For instance, like the dogfight, but like ultimately when you finally go to the anime and Bulma's a huge coward, there's going to be a little bit of a what's going on here moment. And I think this is kind of an issue with any movie that's non-canon, is it doesn't, I mean, it's non-canon. Like there's no stakes. Everything goes back to the way it was at the end.
Yeah, it very much is that, right? Like, there's no character progression or development in any way, which for an anime that doesn't really have a lot to begin with,
That is a little rough, yeah.
To say that there's even less than normal,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then you're taking like the section of the anime that's, I mean, you could have debates about this all day, but for me, it's probably one of the weaker portions of the anime because it's so different tonally and content wise from what it ends up becoming, that you're kind of just like rehashing, like, I put this in air quotes, but the boring part of the story, if you will.
Yeah, I could see that. Where all the fighting? Who would win in a fight, Gurumes or Tien?
Probably Tien pretty soundly, honestly.
But yeah, that's Curse of the Blood Rubies. Hopefully you maybe learned a little something. I know I did. If even it only was that the guy who composed some pieces of score for the English version was related to the guy who's the Bering Strait is named after.
I mean, that's pretty cool. But I mean, me personally, I learned way more about, essentially movie making in Japan, which was, for me, pretty cool. And then especially seeing like how a lot of the people who were involved with this movie go on to these really long careers in a lot of other great media. So
yeah,
it's kind of nice to see where they start.
Right. So, yeah, next time we will be getting into the Red Ribbon Army saga.
Yay!
But that was Curse of the Blood Rubies, and that's maybe it's not. I was gonna say it's maybe the last time we're gonna look at this Pilaf arc, but it's not. There's at least one other Dragon Ball movie that is essentially another retelling of the Pilaf arc.
Why, they really love the Pilaf arc, don't they?
But when we talk about that one, I could just say it. It's Path to Power. That was the intention behind it. It was supposed to be like this is our whateverth anniversary celebration of the Pilaf arc.
I do remember that now. Yes,
it's actually significantly better, or at least that's my memory of it. Is like
well, at least there's that.
That is a very good, like, hey, I might want to watch Dragon Ball, but I don't want to watch 80 episodes of it. Here, watch this one thing.
Sure.
But yeah. Well, since a movie, even a short one, pushes us beyond our usual running length, we'll take our leave of you here, listeners.
What a delightfully relaxing day for a change.
Will we see some excitement in the near future? Will the repairs hold until we reach our destination? Find out next time and help us achieve our final forum.
Final Form is written and produced by Tom Gwelly. It is performed by Dan Kinney and Tom Gwelly. Our webmaster is Dan Kinney. Our theme music is provided by YouTube content creator GVG Kid. Want to learn more about the Dragon Ball universe, including concept art, behind-the-scenes interviews, and recommendations from Jelli and Bekinney? Connect with us on social media. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Final Forum Pod. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you receive your podcasts. And of course, make sure to share it with your friends and family and help us spread the word of the glory of Lord Frieza. The Frieza Force thanks you for your listenership.